Hello, my name is Monty Jason Schaefer. My acronym is Monty from Montana, a strong, sober mind that likes to solve problems in order to help people. Today I would like to discuss some elements of Easter based on the traditional ancient calendars. Easter is approaching on May 5th. May 8th is the oldest or latest date for Easter according to traditional calculations. May 7th has never occurred, but if you read Jewish websites like Chabad, it seems like if there was some significant construction event that wasn't completed before Easter because of the crowds, they would delay it another festival season. So in my estimation, the Jewish system had 9 festivals every 40 days. So 40 times 9 is 360 days. The festival before the Passover festival was likely the Purim, which is captured today in cultural traditions of people in, most especially Italy and Brazil, Carnival. Purim was the celebration of Esther, who, using her feminine wiles, was able to convince the king to save her people. So May 5th is fast approaching. This is the date I'm anchoring to. And today is T-10, or 10 days before May 5th. May 5th would be the 11th day, and in my estimation, the day of what I would call the Messiah death event. Certainly there were a lot of elements leading up to that event. So in homage of that event, on T-10, which is today, April 25th, I would like to examine when did he live. And to begin, I would remind most people that Kepler, who is famous for the study of supernovas, estimated that at his birth there was a supernova. The catalog we have, the earliest one we have, is 185 AD. So there's a lot of extrapolation, estimation to assess historic supernova. The ancient Chinese have the best calendar systems of astronomical events, and they talk about broom comets, etc. We don't know if they had a term for a supernova or if it was just embedded into their comet technology. When we think of comets, one of the common estimations for the birth of Yeshua was the comet, or possibly the star system, and we attribute the name to Halley, which is typical of American or Western exceptionalism. This is a British guy. Halley's, whatever comet. It's kind of on a 75-year cycle, and that gets shifted depending on how close it gets to any of the inner planets when it comes around. I remember being a teenager when the 1986 event occurred, and it's attributed to a guy from 1705 when the Chinese likely observed it as early as 600 BC. So they're saying at least 240 BC, but there's some other evidence that it might have occurred differently. There's a lot of calculations and prediction models on the cycle. So they have no idea if the mass of the comet is deteriorating significantly. They just know it's about a 75-year orbit, plus or minus some. And there's a Harvard website that makes certain predictions, and there's other data that makes different predictions. So you need to understand that when you're talking about dating systems using physics, you're going to always have a plus or minus based on the assumptions you're making in your extrapolation prediction models. with that being said, I'm just going to put out that on the 5th of April of 8 BC, Yeshua was born. BC is really interesting in the traditional BC AD count. There is no 0, so it goes from 1 BC to 180. But what's interesting to me is there's a perfect 600 year in the Bengali calendar. There's no clear understanding why. I would call this the Gangan calendar because this region is the Ganges River. The word Bengal means the land of Ganga, and Bengal is not a local word. It's a British word. So if he was born April 5th, he would have been born in the year of the water ox. So he would have been the good shepherd, and he would have been the ox of God, not the lamb of God. Read your Old Testament. 1 ox was equivalent to 5 lambs in the great sacrifices. There were 5 types of sacrifices: the burnt offering, the sin offering, the thanksgiving offering, the wave offering, and some other one. So, one big step. Doesn't that sound like Neil Armstrong carrying a double-edged sword? And this just means year or cycle. Yeah. So 8 BC, there's a supernova. It's got some interesting tie to, and when I say there's a supernova, like I can't pull up a reference that there's a supernova because the Chinese have the best calendar system, but I see a number 600 there. That he was the water ox is very important. If you haven't watched Ferdinand the Bull, Ferdinand is a shepherd for his sheep and other friends in the agrarian society. And I say the 5th of April, and it's a function of not the moon, but the sun. It's the 15th day after the spring equinox. And I put the 5th of April here in the center. And then I'm going to say plus or minus 10 days for several reasons. One is the calendarization. There could be some error there. We're making huge assumptions about the 365.2422 average tropical year. But what's interesting about this, it is called Tomb Sweeping Day. So King Ming actually means bright light or something, which could mean a supernova. So if we were to take these words, so there I can see moon and sun, and that generally is a meaning of a holiday in the second glyph. So the green-blue water, we're on an earth that's very much green-blue. Notice it said water. The water ox. And we got Sunday and moon, so the sun and the moon. And I'm sure this is just a festival, holiday, celebration. This one's similar, but it's got, those first 2 symbols are the same. This last symbol has a double plus above something, so let's quickly look at what that would be. It's grass, holiday, still grass. And so sometimes I like to decompose the elements. So this was grass. This looks like the upside down box, but they're saying NA based on the data they have. And the grass looks to me to be decomposed of 2 symbols for earth, but I could be incorrect. Okay. So what's interesting about the holiday is they go and they sweep out the grave sites, the, if you watched Mulan, the temples of their deceased. They leave incense or burning joss paper, whatever that is, and they leave food there. And it's somehow a preparation of a reconnection or possibly a resurrection of the ancestors. Pretty interesting that in the Chinese culture that would be the case. The other story for its origin is associated with a servant feeding his master flesh from his thigh with soup. And, that's before the Yeshua death event. And someone was starving, and so someone cut off part of his thigh and said, "Here, let me cook this for you," or whatever, "and eat my flesh so you don't starve to death." So that one's kind of strange. That they have symbols similar to the palm leaves, and that it's pomegranate is not surprising to me. And they do this before they start to plow in the spring. It's very interesting. So the first element of a supernova, the festival of lights, that they're sweeping out the tombs, those are obvious. And then this idea of a servant giving his flesh for the master to eat is very strange. But that just maybe opens our eyes to how little we know about the true Messiah death event. Okay, and then when did he die? So this was a research article published probably in 2012 that explains right in the heart of the Dead Sea, there was an earthquake, 31 AD, plus or minus 5 years. A core sample out of an ocean or a lake or a Dead Sea is not going to lie. The dating mechanisms of core samples is different than radiocarbon dating or other dating techniques. And regardless of whether the time scale shifts, the order of events of a core sample cannot change. The lake core sample, as you get lower in the lake, it's older. And as you get up in the lake, it's younger. So whether or not you want to shift these dates based on some assumption scientists are making, so be it. However, the order will not change. So basically the Dead Sea is so salty that every year it drops a layer of salt at the bottom. But then when an earthquake occurs, several of these layers, because of the earthquake, will liquefaction or liquefy and become kind of one blob. And so based on that geological proof, they conclude that there was an earthquake in the Dead Sea on 31 AD plus or minus 5 years. And a lot of people believe that there was a solar eclipse. And based on the estimated models of the year 31 AD, May 10th, there was a solar eclipse in the Sea of Japan where the Emperor of China and the Emperor, or I don't know who was going on in Japan at the time, would perfectly see this eclipse, and it lasted for about 4.5 minutes. This was the center of it, where it was full scale. Anything along this trail, I believe, would have been a full eclipse of a certain duration. This is called the pinnacle or the peripheral, the maximum of such eclipse, which means the maximum time at which it was a full, in this case, actually an annular eclipse. And so the NASA calculations are a function of NASA since the space race of the 60s, taking high resolution pictures of the moon, calculating its rotational inertia, because even though we have the dark side of the moon, because our rotation of the Earth's, or in the moon's rotation, is similar, it's not exact. So they can see those small deviations, and from that they've developed prediction models of all solar eclipses going back as far as they can go. I've said before, May 10th is too late for an Easter holiday, and my conclusion is that May 5th, which is the same date as Easter this year, was the date of this eclipse. So NASA is saying it was the 10th of May, but if you read carefully, Dr. Eclipse and Mayos, who are the leaders, both of these men are the leaders in this calculation methodology, and they've both now retired, they're going to emphasize that there is some noise here. So for me to say Yeshua died on the 5th of May and it was a solar eclipse is a slight variation, but it's not too far afield. And then the other data point, and at some point I believe I dug into what day this was.
Here's another record in the Chronicles of Emperor Guangwu.
So Guangwu was in the southern part of China.
It's dated 31 AD. Translated, it reads, summer, fourth month of the year, on the day of we switched. Pardon is proclaimed 31 AD.
The sins
no
of the
Christian missionary would have gone to China because Jesus
I think
had
that's
just
an
died.
addition.
And yet in their soul, in their honesty,
so that's an evangelical kind of adding to this.
they didn't know what they were writing. We high man, they didn't know what they were writing.
So we got the fourth month of the year on the day of Renwu. So the fourth month of the year, could that be May 5th? To me, that would put it further back. However, at what point did they change from a solar calendar to the modern lunar solar calendar that they have today? So now the new year shifts sometime in January to February, whereas if you go back to the four columns, I think it's the four columns or the four pillars calendar of ancient China, it was a solar calendar with an equinox, or yes, with the spring equinox as the beginning of the year. So if March 21st is the beginning of the year, 4 months later would have put us in June, and that would put us beyond the time scale. This one says, on the day of Guiha, a man from heaven died. This seems like a better translation, and you can look. There's a human. So they're saying in the translation it's a man. It's likely a man with his spouse, because a human completed is a man and a woman together. I don't know that I have that readily available. So let's see if we can find it. Human. Typing Chinese symbols is not the easiest thing for us gringos. No, I wanted human. I just want this one symbol. Can I please have this one symbol? And since we're going down this tangent, let's also type number 8. And forest, tree, and how about jade or king? Okay, human and human separated is the number 8. Jade, there's heaven, earth, and Middle Earth. So a tree or a forest is a human with children, meaning a connection there. And you're going to notice these fonts can really throw you off from the traditional symbols. So I pasted that font. That font is literally human. So notice man, persons, or people, right? There is no clear connotation here. And if you read our traditional Christian concepts of a man and a woman become one, the left side is the woman, the right side is the man, the left side is energy, the right side is matter, light and shadow. It's all there. This is a human, a twin flame, a pair. If they're divided, somehow that's the number 8. So if the male and the female get divided, that's the number 8. And then if you study the number 7 and 8 in Jewish and Russian languages, there's an interesting finding there, which I may cover on a different day. So then if a human is not divided, if they're together and they're a human, and in Middle Earth they connect, they will create a tree, a family tree, literally a family tree. So let's see if we can find tree. So that's not tree, that's tree with a bunch of other stuff. The second one, this one is tree, most basic form. Am I able to copy? And this is supposed to be what? This is advanced technology. So you're going to notice, to save on space, it's the same shape 3 times or 2 times. So 3 times it happened to mean forest. 2 times it also means forest. So they just repeated the one symbol 2 times in this space or 3 times. There's 3 versions of it. So they stretched this one out to get 3 versions to fit. This is 2 versions of it. Regardless, the stem is this symbol. You got a human with the cross. Cross is connecting heaven to earth. Middle earth is where the children are being created. It's the number 10. Very interesting. Number 1. And they just say line here, but this line connects heaven and earth. And you can see that with the jade symbol. The jade symbol shows all of those connections. So if I were to put in earth and scholar, and I were to hit enter, so it would update. Yeah, I'm getting some really weird translation. So jade is heaven, Middle Earth, and the earth. So let's just see if Google can be smarter, if it has less to deal with. It's interesting because I see the jade symbol there. This is the earth symbol. For whatever reason, they're using a really strange font to likely just confuse us. But the first symbol is earth. And it's got the number 10, which is the connection between heaven and earth. The 10 earth signs or symbols in their belief system. And if you actually were to draw this line is longer than this line. If this line is shorter than this line, it actually means scholar. And again, for whatever reasons, a lot of this is being obfuscated. It's probably that one. But if you're not a Chinese speaker, didn't grow up learning how to write the glyphs, there's no way you're going to know this. So this is child. And did we lose? There it is. So we got Sunday. We got an old Sunday. A scholar is an old Sunday. But that has to decompose. You can see it there. There's a scholar there. And that's important because the cousin that preceded Yeshua would have been born the year before, which would have been 7 BC, the year of the water rat in the animal interpretations. Did I go the wrong way? I'm sorry. 9 BC. He would have been born the year before. Yeshua born 8 BC, 6 months prior. The Baptist was born. And that would have been the water rat. So you can see child there. So let's see what this looks like. So there's my scholar. So that's different than jade, because apparently that's a swooshing. This line is a swooshing. So we got child and scholar embedded in this second glyph. And the scholar looks a lot like Earth. And it's still got the number 10. But now it's got this. This was 1 with Earth. It's also got 1. But somehow the length of it is different. So if the bottom length is super long, it's Earth. Otherwise it's scholar. Very slight difference. So a scholar is a specialist, is a worker. Pronounced she or something like that. Okay, so now we have some interesting ideas, because if I were to go to the Blue Letter Bible and search for net, and I always try to go to Isaiah, but Psalms have some information about the net. He plucked my feet out of the net. Thy children, so this could be hijos like in Spanish. Bar, ben, so this could be a son and a daughter. They lie at the head of the streets as 2 cows, one a bull, one a heifer, in a net. They have fainted. They're dead. Do you have that in your bingo card for the Messiah death event? They shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. That doesn't mean what you think it means. And then they are resurrected. His horses are swifter than eagles. It's very interesting. So we've looked at eagle, we looked at, let's see if we can find 1,000. When he died, 1,000 left. And when she died, 10,000 left. And I think that's a reference to the legions, the centurions. So if you're Pontius Pilate and you're making a mockery of Jewish traditions and you're killing these people, what would the Romans do 300 years later? They would rewrite the story that you washed your hands of all sin. Of course they would. They're motivated to do that. So, if you read Isaiah carefully, the Messiah death event is embedded. But you have to know what you're looking for. And I'm apparently not smart enough to know where Isaiah is. So when I go to Psalms, I always want to look at Psalms 20 to 24, because those are clearly about the death event. The heart is melted like wax. My bones are out of joint. Okay? If my bones are out of joint, that means all my bones are broken. So somehow in the Messiah death event, we've created this thing about not a single broken bone. Maybe before the death event, sure. And when it says your bones are all out of joint, it's a very interesting story. And I don't know if I'm going to find it with 1,000 and 10,000 left, but it's in Isaiah. And so the Messiah death event, we need to start with the when. When did he live? And how did the human die? Because going back to the actual language, the eclipse on the day of Guanhan, when the human from heaven died. That human could have been a man and a woman simultaneously.
Of
but as an evangelical,
eclipse on the
he's not going to pursue new knowledge.
Those Chinese astronomers.
He's going to anchor to his worldview
over all the earth until the 9th hour.
So then he's going to go back to Luke, which when we study the New Testament, was all Pauline written information, at least 500 AD, which is 20 years after the actual event. And if you think carefully about the nature of the event, a solar eclipse doesn't last 3 hours. And so there must have been a storm, there was an earthquake. But the answers are in the scriptures if you're willing to stand in the possibility and metonaneos, whatever that Greek word is. Repent. Keep changing your mind. I don't know how to pronounce that. You need to keep changing your mind, because obviously the Romans adopted Christianity for a reason. Somehow it was demonstrated to them that that God was stronger than their God, so they embraced it. 300 AD, Constantine creates Christianity based mostly on the writings of Paul. And then the Masoretes, 1000 AD, they're falling out of favor. Everyone's not Jewish anymore. So they need to erase what they know of the Messiah death event. So if you read carefully the Old Testament, what the Deuteronomists, Masoretes did to change the actual nature of the original Passover, it wasn't sprinkle blood from a goat onto the door. Read the Greek Septuagint, which was 100 BC, before the Messiah death event. There's a smell of blood and other things in the air, but that's not what the original story was. The golden calf at Mount Sinai with Moses. Mount Sinai isn't where Catherine, Constantine's mother, said it was. The Masoretes changed the meaning of all of that story to somehow say the bull or the calf is the false god, the false Messiah, whatever. But they can erase certain things. They can change numbers. That's easy to do. They can change a few things. Like in Numbers 33, they changed Ben El the sons of God, which is a polytheistic perspective. Ben Israel, just the sons of Israel. Let's make it monotheistic. You can't erase the ox as being the most important offering in the temple. And then, and then you can just manipulate language by changing a verb here or there, changing a comma here or there. So the purpose of these 10 days leading up to the Messiah death event is to suggest that you change your mind. Repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That's not what he said. He said, please change your mind. This is the kingdom of heaven. I'm showing you the societal way in which to live while I'm on this earth. I'm showing you a way, a manner of happiness. And certainly that got hierarchicalized. So if you look at the Christian traditions of the Messiah death event, I am above you and I will lay down my life for you. You see how condescending, non-inclusive, in-group, out-group? That doesn't sound like any of the stuff we read in the stuff we've recently discovered through the Dead Sea Scrolls or the apocryphal, non-canonized Gospels. He kisses Mary Magdalene on the mouth. He tells Timothy, we are all men and women. Whatever that means. I think that goes back to the human thing. We're all men and women. Or the idea of reincarnation that's found in Numbers 33 in the pre-Masoretic Hebrew. Or God is within you. Very inclusive, very loving. And so if you're going to rewrite the story, you want to use it as an institution to control and manipulate people. So you want to impose hierarchical structures into the narrative. So if you read this in the original Greek, by original Greek I mean the original Greek we have, they just can't create these stories ex nihilo, out of nothing. There was something, but the editors had motivations to write it this way. We heard him say, and that cross references to a different version, I think, in Luke. And if you read it carefully, John 2:19, Jesus said, kill my body, destroy this temple, and in 5 days, X days, I'm saying 5 days on purpose, the Chinese, when the solar eclipse occurred, it said the emperor went into his palace for 5 days. So I can just put X days, 3 to 5 days. I shake the box. I'm not fixated. Oh, it says 3 days, and therefore it's 3 days. Standing in the place of possibility means you got to shift things around. The core words are destroy this temple, which if you go and look at the Greek, and it literally says 46 years was this temple made. I think he died when he was 40 and 30 days old. So that's interesting. So what I'm saying is shake the box. Why would they mention the number 40 in the same chapter? And then when you see numbers like 3 days or even 46, well, I'm proposing that Yeshua lived to be 40 years old in 30 days. So then you can see that if you mix up the words, and in natural language processing, so I've done a lot of this. So the bag of words is a common method of finding correlations, where you're just saying, let's just mix up the words and see what words are there. Make a word cloud out of it. But you got to be more careful than that. And so I interpret the original. So the question is, what does the word raise mean? So it doesn't seem like destroy, kill. There's a big difference there. So how hard is it to change a number when you're an editor changing text? So the question is well, what does raise it up mean? Egiro, that looks like ergo, like work. So this is all tied to a resurrection or a construction. Now one of the other easiest manipulations you can do in the text is just negate it. So I currently read John 2:19. Jesus answered and said unto them, you will kill me, and within 3 to 5 days after you kill me, you will then destroy your own temple. So to conclude, let's just put a frame of a potential Messiah death event in the small, like in the the highest levels. So in summary, I've kind of given a birth date and a death date, but what are the fundamental elements of the Messiah death event? Yeshua dies with spouse, human, both male and female. As I'll later discuss, he doesn't lay down his life for his friends, which is very condescending. So he's the main event. His sacred family, Sagrada Familia, would be the main event. If you read Herodotus or Josephus, there's some story about 2 eagles made out of gold in front of the temple when Jared died, and the people tore them down, destroyed part of the entrance of the temple, not the temple. It's fiction, but they've manipulated the word. So then you have to rethink. If they said Pontius was the good guy and Pontius is the bad guy, maybe Herod was a good guy, and then they repainted the whole history that Herod was a bad guy. Pontius was a bad guy. I'm going to suggest that Herod may have been different than the narrative. Because when someone lies, to what degree are they going to lie? Maybe Herod was a bad guy. But I'm open-minded. I'm willing to change my mind and stand in the place of possibility. So, so now we have 500 being crucified a day. They would stab one of the disciples, one of the friends, in the kidney the day before that person was to be crucified. So if they ran off, they would be dead in 2 to 3 days from sepsis anyway. And Yeshua they were captured in the stole on the temple grounds. So Yeshua would use one of the water basins to comfort that disciple before they died, because their concept of death and the afterlife was different. We were born on this earth to die. They didn't fear the death. They could have run off and died in the desert, but they chose to come and die with their friends, as friends. A group of them were sent away, the apostles. We say 12, there are 12 tribes. It's probably 10. Look at your hands. They weren't representatives of the 12 tribes, they were representatives of the nations. Recall the 70 in the Old Testament. You have 5 menorah on the left, representing the female nations, 5 menorah on the right, representing the male nations, and Jehovah being the great light that will light the 10 nations. So, whenever I read Revelation, it says 12 stars. I'm like, okay, that's maybe 12 stars, maybe 10. The Chinese say the number 12 refers to the heavens, the number 10 refers to the earth. So it could be 12 stars because that's the heavens. When you're talking about the earth, it's 10. I've already shown the symbol for earth, academic 10, human forest. When a man and a woman come together, they're a human. When they have children, the number 10 is somehow added. So Yeshua dies with his spouse. When Yeshua dies, 1,000, I'm going to say centurions, leave. When Yeshua's spouse dies, 10 times more. Why are there 11,000 centurions in the temple doing this execution? So certainly there was a gymnasium nearby. Maybe some of the crucifixions occurred there, but this is like Las Vegas. This is the main event. The torture and death of Yeshua, his spouse, his children, likely the women in his life, the mothers in his life. Some of them died, maybe some of them lived and got away. I would assume, based on the lies that were given, is the Baptist lived to tell the tales. Dead men tell no tales. The Baptist supposedly was in a prison. Some woman danced for Herod. Herod immediately cut off the head of the Baptist and presented it to the woman. But later, when Yeshua is dying, that same leader has to get permission from Pontius to kill someone. The word here is called hinky. I don't know if I spelled that right. It's probably hinky like that. There is something afoul in Denmark, to quote Shakespeare, however that went. Something amiss. But it does tell us that someone was beheaded. Now read how the bullock, the male cow, is sacrificed in Leviticus 4. It's beheaded. Cat's in the cradle, Yeshua's spouse. Silver spoon, little boy blue. Little Iscariot, little Judah, the son of Yeshua, likely 17 at the time. And the man in the moon, you put the head in a globe, you put it on the pillars, everyone can see. He died first. 1,000 centurions leave. When she dies, there's a metaphor to worse than giving birth, and she's crying out. So when he dies, I'm pretty sure this is the heart melts. So go to the Middle Ages on how they were killing people. Where do you think they got these ideas from? You think they just made them up? Burning people at the stake. Likely some of his friends. Hanging someone, drawing and quartering them. Where do you think this comes from? Nehustan was the woman Her death was so brutal, and if you looked, it looked like, so at some point, like the lower part of her body got separated from the top, and she was still alive. So her lower part of her spine, her coccyx, is moving all over the place like a snake, and she's in some sort of net or contraption up in a tree. And those that knew what the Nehustan was are like, oh my gosh. And those that looked were saved. Saved from what? Okay, you got 500,000 to 1 million Jews in town. You're killing 2 people and a bunch of other people that some of them may have liked, some of them didn't care for them, some of them wanted them dead. Okay? So the death of the husband and wife is irrelevant to them. Read the part about the nets. After they died, they were just thrown in the streets. No one cared. And then we're supposed to believe Joseph of Arimathea cared and took care of their bodies. Again, if the story is hinky, maybe Joseph of Arimathea was a good guy or a bad guy. I just don't stand anywhere. I don't make a hard stand. But the method in which they were killed in the temple was blasphemy. So Pontius was a brutal guy. He likely had him in some sort of chain system, 5 golden rings with nails and spikes to keep him entrenched in these nets. But the cat is in the cradle. She's in a net. So what are Roman men gonna do to a woman trapped in a net? You don't have that in your Messiah death event bingo, do you? The cat's in the cradle. She's being ravaged sexually over and over again. And then Pontius with his Romans, they know the Jewish traditions. They're like, bring out the laws of Moses. Aren't there 632? Let's make sure this man and this woman violate every one of them. Let's bring out a cow or a goat. Make sure the woman and the man are sexually attached to these animals. Let's go through the law of Moses. Every law, whether it's 632 or 999. Let's make sure they violate every one of the laws. So, you have 500,000 people for the Passover. The main event is we've taken over the altars of the Passover to kill these people. There's 24 guardians of the temple. You got to remember the temple was a school. So there was a headmaster and mistress for each tribe. And somehow there was probably some sort of cannibalistic requirement of them, of eating of the flesh of these tortured people. But Yeshua's blood was taken into the Holy of Holies and spilled in the Holy of Holies when he died. And that was the blasphemy of blasphemies. So what is 1 million people going to do? Kill them all. So if you're one of the 1,000 or 10,000 centurions that left, you're going to leave. You're going to go to another place, whether Egypt or whatever. You're not going to go back to the chief headquarters of Capernaum and report this, because you've left your post. You will be killed for that. And so Pontius likely dies. And the Jews tear down the temple. Within 5 days, probably less, Capernaum's not that far, so let's say within 1 to 2 days, reinforcements arrive. And I'm going to say from Capernaum. I'm pretty sure that is where the major armaments were for the Romans. They get there, and maybe when Kill Them All occurred, maybe a few of the centurions fled to Capernaum saying, We were attacked. Pontius is dead. So what are the Romans going to do? So we're told that this all happened in 70 AD, and it was because some guy named Yeshua was invited to a party, but a different man named Yeshua showed up, and there was some sort of dispute among the Jews, and all of a sudden the whole city's on fire. That's what we're supposed to believe. So 70 AD is an easy fiction. And then it goes back to say who actually died here. Was it Pontius that died? Was it Julius Caesar? Et tu, Brute? Was Brute one of the centurions that was watching this death event and decided to kill Julius Caesar right then and there? I don't know, but the point is the history would apply. If you understand that when you make history, you have to make it out of something. And then you're crafting it because you want it to tell a certain story. That Josephus is writing this so late, it opens up the idea to possibility. I currently stand with Pontius because that is the framework that we have. But I'm capable of changing my mind and repenting and saying, that could have been the whole Julius Caesar Ides of March thing. I don't put a high probability on that. I do put a high probability on this portion of it based on what I read in Psalms and Isaiah and understand what occurred. So there was a blasphemy. The Jews kill them all, tear down the temple. The Romans show up, kill everyone. And if you read, it says Jerusalem is empty except for the poor. And if you think about this, if this was an event, that could have been for 30 years. So we could look at what was the Roman economic data, if we had yearly or census every 10-year data on taxes collected in the regions. It's very likely we don't. The other thing that likely happened on this day of the death is Pompeii. And we're supposed to also believe November of, I think, 71 AD. I don't remember. But notice the dates are similar. Ask a geologist about Pompeii, and they're going to say 100 AD plus or minus 100 years. So we know that we have an earthquake right in that frame. And now we know Pompeii. Because you have to understand what Constantine did. He embraced Christianity 250 some years on, when everyone has passed away. It's kind of that 2 or 3 generation rule. But there's some really weird stuff. Like in North Africa, there were saints of the early Christian movement before the Constantine canonization and institutionalization that would go to the Roman leaders and say, I want to be killed. Why would they say that? I want to be killed. And then they would say, like the disciples or like Yeshua or something. They would say, some connection. Why would they say that? And reluctantly, some of the Romans would execute different people based on that. So the Messiah death event, and the other obvious thing is the stole, the changing house, when Yeshua cleansed the temple, the den of thieves. There was some lottery. It was like Las Vegas. They turned an area of the temple into Las Vegas. But I think the most troubling thing for Yeshua was the mistreatment of the animals, which would make the animals under stress, which would put adrenaline and cortisol in the blood, and therefore the meat later eaten. And that was the great blasphemy. So let me conclude. My name is Monty Schaefer. I'm celebrating the 10 days before Easter. T-10 today. When did he live? He was born the 5th of April, the 5th-ish of April, 8 BC. There was a supernova. He was a water ox, the ox of God, the shepherd of his flock. And he died the 5th of May, 31 AD. There was a solar eclipse, an earthquake. Pompeii erupts. The temple is all destroyed. And Matthew 24 follows. So so that has to actually go here. Okay, so anyway, this Ides of March was a tangent. Pompeii was a tangent. So let's put these tangents in these little brackets. Important data, but they were tangents. But you have to do the math. Pontius is torturing some people, blasphemies the temple, a bunch of centurions leave, so the Jews kill those Romans in the city, destroy their own temple. Roman reinforcements arrive, kill all of the others, but the Romans are still in town. So that's the missing data point. The Yeshua with the saints, with the 5,000 that just got killed, appear in a cloud of glory and kill them all. They kill them all except for the Nehustan. So those that looked upon this death event and understood what it was, they were saved. And then it says that Jerusalem was empty except for the poor. And for 30 years we kind of have my estimation is the Baptist took the writings to preserve as much as possible to Qumran. So the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Qumran cave scrolls, were preserved by the Baptist, by the scholar. Of course, if the Baptist was born the year before, he would have been the year of the water scholar. So those of you that are looking for Matthew 24 to occur in some future time, it's not going to happen. It already happened. The New Testament has clues that it already happened. And many of the saints arose and appeared to many. The only people they could appear to that would later tell the story were those that survived. Everyone that survived in Jerusalem were Christians, because otherwise they were dead. The disciples were killed with Yeshua. The Jews saw it as blasphemy, destroyed the temple. Roman reinforcements came in and there was a big battle, and then Matthew 24 shows up and everyone is dead except those that understood that Yeshua was Yeshua. And then people want to say, well, what about Yeshua the Egyptian that was supposed to start a war, or the Hebrew Ben Joseph, the Messiah that would be the warrior? He did it. He did it without raising a sword. Maybe he raised the sword after the resurrection. Or maybe she did. Or maybe Iscariot did. So they had 3 children at least. Judah, Ish, Ka. I think it's Ka. Re. Ot. Look that up in Egyptian. Ish Kariot. And there was something about 30 pieces of silver and something about this Las Vegas gambling system that was part of how the stole operated on the temple grounds. All of that had to come from somewhere, but they would invert the story. Judah betrayed his father. So Judah would have been 17 at the time. The oldest. Shalom to all of you. May we forever remember that we were put on this earth so that we may return to the heavens above, Elohim, Ananazi, whatever word you want. And in order to do so, this earth has to fill with the knowledge of Jehovah like the waters fill the sea. And how can we understand who Jehovah was if we don't understand the Messiah? Death event. Shalom to all of you, my friends. T-10. When did he live? Likely born the 5th of April, 8 BC, the Great Water Ox, and likely died 40 years later. May God bless and keep all of you.